Hello and welcome to another Atypical Philosopher video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pierce. This is the Ukraine War Update Extra. This is where I go through the nuggets surrounding this war to give you a bit of extra context and just some general discussion. And if you like it, awesome. If you don't, there's always other YouTube channels you can hang out at. So let's start today with the British intelligence updates. Defense intelligence. So Russia has likely augmented some of its units west of the Dnipro River with mobilized reservists. However, this is from an extremely low level of manning. In September 2022, Russian officers described companies in the Kherson sector as consisting of between 6 and 8 men each. Companies should deploy with around 100 personnel, so really undermanned there compared to what they should be. In the last 6 weeks, there's been a clear move from Russian ground forces to transition to a long-term defensive posture on most areas of the front line in Ukraine. This is likely due to a more realistic assessment that the severely undermanned, poorly trained force in Ukraine is currently only capable of defensive operations. I was talking a little bit about this morning in my maps video. Even if Russia succeeds in consolidating long-term defensive lines in Ukraine, its operational design will remain vulnerable. To regain the initiative, it will need to regenerate higher quality mobile forces, which are capable of dynamically countering Ukrainian breakthroughs and conducting their own large-scale offensive operations. And this brings me on to this next point. So while this is from Chriso on Twitter, while some Russian military bloggers are still claiming improbably that everything is fine with the training of newly mobilized men, so this goes back to what the Defense British Intelligence update was saying, others are increasingly acknowledging that the army is providing little or no official training. Bloggers are organizing to fill the gap. So Pavel Gubarev, a pro-Russian activist and former neo-Nazi from Donetsk, comments on his Telegram channel that he is getting, quote, a lot of reports from the ranges where the mobilized are collected. In short, there is no training and combat leveling. Life is below par, etc. In response to, quote, the criminal mistakes of the Ministry of Defense over the last 10 years, he writes, Civic initiative from below helps us to be combat ready and equipped. An initiative called MVP from Rokot aims, quote, to solve the state task of preparing people for war. The initiative is being organized by the Deadline Z Telegram channel and aims to establish, quote, a base and instructors in every city in Russia. The channel has appealed for experts with personal experience in tactics, shooting practice, medicine, and communications. Deadline Z writes that the training is, quote, all in the form of practical tasks and skills training. They practice what is necessary in a special military operation zone, first aid and evacuation of the wounded from the front line. Instructors with combat experience help prepare for deployment. They tell you what to bring with you first and show you how to use it. All possible scenarios are practiced, including the threat of a UAV. That's a drone. According to Deadline Z, training is underway in 86 Russian cities, and the number of people wishing to join is growing. The instructors are combat veterans, doctors, rescuers of the Ministry of Emergency Situations who have visited hotspots. So there you go. That's a really interesting scenario whereby the Russians clearly aren't training their soldiers well enough, and these uh, claims coming from the mobilized soldiers in these camps. And again, other ones coming out today where there's a video of them just asking for sleeping bags. A whole unit of people saying, "Look, can we have some sleeping bags? We don't have sleeping bags." Uh, just terrible preparation for the war that the Russians are giving to their newly mobilized soldiers has led to these people, civilians getting together, people, veterans or Telegram channels getting together and providing training for potential mobilized soldiers and basically anyone. But it's just really fascinating insight into the problems that they're facing. Okay, to go completely left field here. This is I've talked to you before about what happens if you don't maintain artillery or if you overuse it. The barrel can rupture and it can cause pretty devastating consequences. Well, here's an example of a Ukrainian cannon that has either not been well maintained or has just been overused. And this is what happens, which is a pretty fundamental issue there, and that cannon will need some pretty fundamental repair work done. It may even be well beyond its beyond economic repair, as they say in the car industry. Okay, people have asked me about this, and I didn't mean to mention this the other day. So, Hawk air defense units have already been donated, I think, by Spain. These are not the newest of systems, but US is considering giving them to Ukraine. I don't see why not. I don't suppose the Americans would have, if they've got a bunch of these in storage. They might as well give them over to help, especially in this climate of needing so much air defense across Ukraine. So this is what Reuters said. The United States considering sending their older Hawk air defense equipment from storage to Ukraine. The missiles would be an upgrade to the Stinger missile systems, a smaller, shorter range air defense system that the US has already sent to help the Ukrainians. So on and so forth. So that would be really good. I'd say why not? Absolutely send them over. Here is an example of drones being used to spot. Obviously, there's nothing unusual here. You quite often see BTRs or BMPs, infantry fighting vehicles, APCs, armored personnel carriers, or tanks hiding behind buildings and under trees to get away from being spotted. But of course, drones are pretty useful at spotting them. Here is okay. This looks like a house that's been pretty much had its day already. But I just want to show you the effects of war, which is here these guys are hiding behind a civilian building, and they then become a target. But then the civilian building becomes a target, and this artillery here is pretty catastrophic. So there you have it from a different angle. Bosh. The building has gone, and the vehicle is on fire as well. So it's a successful artillery hit, but the collateral damage that gets done to other places, and don't forget, flora and fauna as well. There's an ecological cost to this war, and something I want to talk about in future as well, which is all the money that's been spent on this war would otherwise have been spent on other things, is now not being spent on other things. What does that mean going forward? But that's a massive debate to be had elsewhere. Right. Okay. I'm going to take you back to Shakhtarsk. So this is area to the east of Donetsk. I think probably around here. It's not on this wall map. So you've got, this is the Ukrainian rail system. So although the wall map shows the main lines here, these sort of black lines, there are other lines that connect as well. And this shows them all. And I think this hit somewhere to the east of Donetsk, about here, Shakhtarsk. Now, if you remember, 2 days ago, there was this huge set of explosions and fire that was raging in Shakhtarsk as this fuel train got hit. And this would have caused fundamental damage to the rail lines as well. So actually, that is a very useful strategic hit for the Ukrainians, as they hit fuel that it will be bound for front lines somewhere. And these 12 fuel tanks were on fire on the railway tracks, and that spread to the railway station. And this caused a really big problem for the Russians. Well, it was then hit again yesterday. Further attacks on occupied Shakhtarsk oil depot on fire. So another huge fire started in the occupied city of Shakhtarsk in Donetsk Oblast on the afternoon 27th of October. So that's yesterday. An old depot is currently ablaze. So 60-ton tanks in the vicinity of the railway station caught fire from the day before. So this is coming under, quite a bit of intense targeting at the moment. Firefighters extinguished the fire in Shakhtarsk Donetsk at 7:22. So that's this morning, 7:22. We're waiting for the aftermath picture. Just a huge fire there, and that's HIMARS hitting all that way back behind the front lines. So that's how useful HIMARS are, that they can be placed around here and hit some of these really strategically useful targets and objectives. Okay, so I'm going to just show you a picture of something in the dark hitting something in the dark. What you can hear are the Gepard or Gepard autocannons that the Germans provided. They provide not only a really useful 15-kilometer radar network. So especially if you place them all together, you get a really good radar coverage. Okay, 15 kilometers is not huge, but it's if you can use them in a network, it becomes quite a useful coverage. And then they have got their autocannons that have a range of about up to 5 kilometers. But these autocannons are particularly useful for hitting stuff like these Iranian drones. It's a cheaper and fairly effective way of being able to take them down. Here's an example of this at night. So you can see the tracer bullets, and it seems like they've hit their target. I don't know. Maybe not, or maybe that's just the bullet somehow exploding. I don't know exactly what's going on, but maybe you can let me know in the thread there how these rounds work and whether they explode at the end of their range or something.
Блядь, это у меня с балкона, блядь, сдать.
But that's the Gepard, which is this piece of kit. When they were provided, people were saying, "Oh, their autocannons are a bit out of date. You need better things to hit sort of things like cruise missiles or planes or helicopters." Actually, no, these are becoming really quite useful for taking out drones. This is exactly the sort of thing you need, and particularly the radar on board, which has, as I say, S-band search radar with a range of 15 kilometers and a Q-band Doppler tracking radar. So pretty useful for the Ukrainians and are being used. Okay, as we come to the end, there's two things I want to show you. One is a comedy video, but it makes a serious point, and the point comes out of this, and it's a video I've been meaning to play for some time. Uh, Hopefully, you get how appropriate it is to this context. But here you've got an Associated Press report on stuff that happened towards the beginning of the war. Kill everyone. Russian violence in Ukraine was strategic. Okay. And this was talking about stuff that happened around a tiny village. So I don't even want to pronounce that name, but that place. And let's read a little bit. So, the deaths of these men were part of a pattern of violence that left hundreds of civilians beaten, tortured, and executed in territory under Chaiko's command. So, this is a guy, Alexander Chaiko. So, soldiers providing security peered from behind fences, their guns bristling in every direction. Two Ka 52 Alligator attack helicopters circled overhead, providing additional cover for Colonel General Alexander Chaiko as he escorted an aid convoy in March from the schoolhouse uh, on Centralna Street that Russian officers commanded as a headquarters. Okay, so it's about this guy, uh, and it's about what was happening with Russian troops and what they were doing around this area. So 15 minutes away in the village of Ozera, the lives of three men were about to take a dramatic turn for the worse. While Chaiko was directing Russia's attack on Kiev from Zhivka, the men were interrogated and tortured by Russian troops and then shot in the garden of a large house less than a mile from where the general now stood. The deaths of these men were part of a pattern of violence that left hundreds of civilians beaten, tortured, and executed in territory under his command. This wasn't the work of rogue soldiers, an investigation by the Associated Press and the PBS series Frontline shows. It was strategic and organized brutality perpetrated in areas that were under tight Russian control, where military officers, including Chaiko himself, were present. The story is part of an investigation that includes War Crimes Watch Ukraine interactive experience and the documentary Putin's Attack on Ukraine documenting war crimes on PBS. So this is all about the fact that the war crimes are strategic and intentional. And in fact, there's been a couple of American volunteers who have just been interviewed by the Telegraph, I think, talking about their experience of being tortured. Okay, and what was happening to them. The war crimes are just 10 a penny over there at the moment. We do not take prisoners. And this is the idea that they were told, not really to, if you think about like doing war in accordance with the Geneva Convention, this is not what happened uh, around this area. And in fact, this is just indicative of stuff that was happening all over and has happened all over Ukraine at the hands of the Russians. Witnesses and survivors in Bucha, as well as Zera, Babinci, and Zhivka, all areas under Chaiko's command, told AP and Frontline that the Russian soldiers tortured and killed people on the slightest suspicion that they might be helping the Ukrainian military. Sweeps intensified after Russian positions were hit with precision. Interviews and videos show, and soldiers in intercepted phone calls obtained by the AP told their loved ones that they'd been ordered to take a no mercy approach to suspected informants. Soldiers told their mothers, wives, and friends back in Russia that they had killed people simply for being out in the street when real civilians would have been in the basement. Calls the Ukrainian government intercepted near Kyiv show. On the 21st of March, a soldier named Vadim called his mother. We have the order to take phones from everyone and those who resist. In short, to hell with it, because we have the order. It does not matter whether they're civilians or not. Kill everyone. So on and so forth. I mean, it's just a really terrible indictment of the Russian soldiers and the war crimes under the auspices of the command and control of the Russian military. So that's pretty terrible. It is very terrible. It's horrible. And then I start questioning. I talked a little bit about this before. Is how do human beings do this? How do they torture? And again, it's a case of otherization and dehumanization. So when we've looked previously at the propaganda on Russian TV and Julia Davis and her translations of the Russian propaganda, you have people saying we should just kill, burn, drown Ukrainian children. And what they do is they turn them into less than human. And if they're less than human, then it gives you the kind of moral excuse to treat them as less than human. So you can treat them like animals. This is what happened with Jews in the Second World War with the Nazis. You dehumanize them; they are not human, so therefore it's okay to do these otherwise morally horrific things to them. But at some point, you've got to wonder, as a Russian soldier, whether you're on the right side. And actually, anyone watching this video, if you defend Russia in what they're doing, if you're pro-Russian and you're watching this, at some point you've got to think, am I on the right side? Really, am I on the right side? When you look at all the terrible things that have been happening, are we the baddies? And this leads me on to a great Mitchell and Webb sketch that uses the Second World War and the Nazis as a way of expressing this idea. So this is comedy, but it is really poignant to me, and it has a good point, and this can be mapped onto the present conflict, and I hope you kind of get why I'm playing this.
Very well. They're coming. Now we'll see how these Russians deal with a crack SS division.
Hans?
Have courage, my friend.
Yeah. Hans, I've just noticed something.
These communists are all cowards.
Have you looked at our caps recently?
Our caps?
The badges on our caps. Have you looked at them?
What? No. A bit?
They've got skulls on them. Have you noticed that our caps have actually got little pictures of skulls on them?
I don't,
Hans, are we the baddies?
Let's see. We should be able to hold them at this point here, at least for a few hours.
And why skulls, then?
What?
Why skulls?
Well, maybe they're the skulls of our enemies.
Maybe. But is that how it comes across? I mean, it doesn't say next to the skull, yeah, we killed him, but trust us, this guy was horrid.
Well, no, but...
I mean, what do skulls make you think of? Death, cannibals, beheading, pirates.
Pirates are fun.
I didn't say we weren't fun, but fun or not, pirates are still the baddies. I just can't think of anything good about a skull.
What about pure Aryan skull shape?
Even that is more usually depicted with the skin still on. Whereas the Allies...
No, you haven't been listening to Allied propaganda. Of course they're going to say we're the bad guys.
But they didn't get to design our uniforms. And their symbols are all, you know, quite nice. Stars, stripes, lions, sickles.
What's so good about a sickle?
Well, nothing. And obviously, if there's one thing we've learnt in the last 1,000 miles of retreat, is that Russian agriculture is in dire need of mechanisation.
Tell me about it.
But you've got to say, it's better than a skull. I mean, I really can't think of anything worse as a symbol than a skull.
A rat's anus?
Yeah, and if we were fighting an army marching under the banner of a rat's anus, I'd probably be a lot less worried, Hans.
Okay. So...
Very
well.
That I think that really sums up, you know, the idea that at some point, well, do some of these soldiers realize that they are the bad guys? And I know that's really simplistic and it's much more complex than that. But when you are carrying out torture of civilians in a country that you have invaded, when you are indiscriminately destroying civilian infrastructure or discriminately destroying civilian infrastructure, at some point you've got to think, is this the right thing? Is this good? And is what I'm doing morally good? And does that excuse all of these things that we're doing? Anyway, there's a bit of a philosophical, psychological conversation to be had there. And I don't want to belabor the point, so just I'll leave it at that. But I think that comedy sketch has a very poignant, you know, message to say. And I hope you get that. Anyway, there you go. Thanks so much. I'm going to be away after this weekend for a little bit. I will try and do the updates as I'm away. It just depends on internet and capability and all that sort of stuff. But in the meantime, thanks so much for your support. Please like, subscribe, and share. Pop along to uasupporter.com/ATB if you want to get some stash, and anything you buy gives my channel a little bit of commission. And there are all the other ways you can support. But thanks so much for being here. Final thank you to all the members and new members who have joined. New members in the last week or so have been Craig McLemore, John Nairich, and Jonans Kilioros. So thank you so much for joining and helping out this channel, as well as my established members who are awesome. Thank you and goodbye.